So uh, I want to welcome you all to today's community conversation about training and education that are in terms of what the kinds of things that BINA can be doing or should be doing. And it's going to be a 90-minute session because we were afraid that we couldn't squeeze everything into 60 minutes and still have time for adequate discussion. And in addition, it's being recorded, so that's why we're just going to start right on time so that we don't waste any of your time, and people who come in late or have to leave early will be able to view the recording, or people who missed it entirely may be able to view the recording and submit comments after the meeting. So on this slide, there is a list of the working group members, and I won't name them all individually because there's so many and we're pressed a little bit for time. If you want to know who they are and know more about them, they're all listed on the BINA website as well. But we have representation from core facilities across North America, including Canada and Mexico. I do want to take a moment just at the beginning to summarize some of the activities that BINA is already supported to carry out. And this includes production of meetings, workshops, and training opportunities, some type of exchange of experience, visits, and professional development, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, lots of education, cultural, intersectional kinds of opportunities, and community conversations, of which I think this is essentially the first under the auspices of BINA, unless you count the ones that we had jointly with other groups during the initial stages of the COVID crisis. And then also searchable, we're also working toward development of a searchable community-driven training and education resource. And you'll hear more about some of these initiatives because we want to know what's needed so that we avoid duplication of what's already out there, and so that we can find out what kinds of original contributions BINA might be able to make. So as I just alluded to, we want to understand how best to support the training and education needs of the BINA community. During the course of this conversation, we'll use polls at various points to get your feedback, but we encourage you to also raise your hand or put comments and questions in the chat. The results of the polls on each subtopic will be posted before the next topic is introduced. And I just want to say that as a working group over the past year, we have discussed lots of ideas, and we're using the ideas that we've come up with as discussion for this discussion as starting points for your feedback, and we'd appreciate help prioritizing them and suggesting things that we've overlooked. So as the first poll, we're going to find out a little bit about who you are.
So that poll is just gone into
posting
the chat.
the link to the poll in the chat, and you click on it and fill it out.
So we'll give you a couple of minutes to go to that poll and complete it, and then Vanessa will share the results and we can have a conversation around them. Yes, I think we definitely should have come up with some spooky music to put in the background whilst we were doing this, or some, Jeopardy countdown or something like that. So hopefully everybody can access that, that form. Great, thanks for the thumbs up. So Vanessa, just to give you an idea, there's 36 participants, so I don't know how the tally is doing on the poll, but we're about a minute into that right now. But as soon as you feel we've got everybody's comments and responses, we can move on to the discussion portion. Great. Thank you. We got that completed in less than the 2 minutes that was allocated, so that'll give us plenty of time for discussion. So Kate, did you want to just go through generally the information
Sure.
here,
If you
which is essentially
just slide
around
back
our
to the
audience?
top pie chart. So as sort of it could be predicted, most of us are from the United States, but we do have a couple from Mexico, and from Canada we have quite a few, and at least one from France. I think Gleb also was present, and so there may be other European countries represented as well. So that's great that we have representation from so wide an audience. And in terms of where we work, most of us are academics, a few of us are in industry or at non-for-profit research institutions, and a few are consultants. So a lot of core directors, it looks like, and core facility staff, which is great. And the rest kind of self-explanatory. And we're looking at mostly very small core facilities, which that's very interesting. 37%. You're responsible for everything. And the next largest group is very small core facilities with only 1 or 2 additional FTEs. And the larger core facilities are a smaller portion of the pie. Very interesting. Thank you. So at this point, I'll introduce Chris Cubo and Anna Yost and Doug Cromie, who will talk about some of our proposals for exchange of experience activities and then solicit your feedback.
Everyone, I'll just give you kind of a quick overview of what our subgroup has been talking about. And we have 2 main activities that we've been thinking about, and we're actually going to have separate polls and discussions for each of them. But I'm going to give you an overview of both of them. So I'll tell you kind of the whole our whole overview, and then we'll have 2 separate polls and discussions. So the first activity that we've been talking about is one-on-one visits between or exchanges between core facilities, and this is largely focused on core facility personnel. And we envision these COVID, if we take COVID out of the equation, these would be in-person visits of maybe 2 or 3 days between core facilities. And the idea would be to focus on learning a skill, maybe a technical instrument related skill, something like that. So you'll see questions in the poll about what areas of focus and what topics you might be interested in for this format. But we also want to get a sense of people's comfort level for travel during COVID, comfort level for hosting during COVID, and also if you'd be interested in any sort of virtual format. So that would be, still 2 to 3 days, one-on-one where you'd be exchanging with another core facility, but mostly done virtually. So that's the first activity that we've been talking about. And then the second one is more of an informal virtual group. So the idea here would be drop-in sessions where imaging scientists from various different levels, backgrounds, types of institutions can talk to each other, support each other, and share their experiences. And again, we'll have some questions in the poll about what formats people prefer, what topics people prefer. And there's a lot of different directions this could go. It could be kind of an informal group where we just discuss whichever topics are on people's minds, or maybe we pick a topic per session and have an expert come in to kind of introduce the topic. We have areas of focus on this slide that we've suggested. I'm not going to go through them. You'll see them all in the polls. And we're also interested to see which kind of areas people would be interested more in a one-on-one format versus a group format. Yeah, so I think we're ready to go to the poll then.
So the first poll, which is focused on the more sort of like in-person or virtual one-on-one time approaches, has just gone into the chat. So we're coming up on the 2-minute mark on the poll. Is there anybody out there that still needs a little bit more time on the poll? Or is everybody feeling comfortable they've got their answers in?
We only have 11 respondents so far, so we'll give people some more time.
So can you move the slide up just a tiny bit, Vanessa? There you go.
Okay, it looks like we're ready to talk about some of our results here. And some of the first questions were actually just to get some demographic information and to help us think about how we might plan such activities, in particular in terms of COVID. We do think about the activities mostly as geared towards people that are involved in the core facility and or looking to explore future a job in that particular area. So, and that seems to be what most of the respondents are here. So maybe go to the next question here. This is great. I'm so happy to see that there are so many responses of people that say that are willing to host people. That's actually really encouraging. And I assure you that because you checked the box, it doesn't automatically schedule you in our database or anything like that. But we're really happy to see that there's so many people that are willing to do it even during these pandemic times. So thank you for that. That's very encouraging. This also helps us out to the what you'd be comfortable with. I guess actually maybe we should have asked a little bit on people who are hosting as well too, but it looks like there's still people that are fairly comfortable with driving distance, and maybe even some that are okay also with traveling by plane. There are some that indicate virtual only, which is something maybe we'll talk about in just a second. So maybe the next question. Okay, and this is something we're very interested about here, are what the limitations to participating in such an activity would be. And I guess it's no surprise based on the demographics we saw in the previous poll that a lot of people would worry about their core not being staffed, particularly if you're the only person who's running it too. And also not surprising that people would also have home responsibilities as well. I'm curious to know though, are there things from here that we didn't think about, something else that you would have mentioned here? I realized, I mean, you might not feel comfortable mentioning it, but if you do, it'd be interesting if anybody has any additional things that might be a limitation to them participating. You can pop it in the chat if you want. Okay, let's look at the next question. Institution might not give financial support, cost of travel. Yes, yeah, and those are definitely things that we are looking into as well. It seems like okay, so it looks like cost certainly is a major limiting factor as well. In terms of the virtual interaction, it looks like there's actually a fair number of people, over half, who say that they would be interested in, and like pretty much everybody is potentially interested in it. And I'm interested to hear a little bit about how you think about a virtual interaction. Would it be something where you would be just checking in maybe for a few hours each day or something? Would you be tuning in to look at a particular procedure or something, or used on a microscope for several hours at a time? I'm interested to know what you envisioned when you had thought of virtual interaction. Yeah, Elka?
Well, I think unlike an actual in-person visit, I would see this being more productive if it was limited to one particular topic or one particular interest area, so that it can actually, I don't think any one of us would really support on either end of the camera or connection would support 2 or 3 days of 8 hours a day hanging out with each other virtually. So if that was a little bit more focused, I think then it could be really useful, because it would mean that both sides would really set aside that time to interact on that particular topic.
Okay. Other thoughts about what you'd envision in terms of a virtual interaction, and what kind of format you would like for that?
I'd like to just mention that one possible thing would be just a remote sessions to assist with learning a new technique on your instrument, for example. That wouldn't necessarily take a full 2 or 3 days, but it might be something that could occur over 2 to 3 days, where you work on something, and then when you have a problem, the person can remote in and assist you, for example.
Okay. Sure. And Rebecca Gilson says in the chat, also sessions again on specific topics, or so very targeted interactions, basically. Doug?
Yeah, one thing that occurred to me is that not every institution has a broad-minded understanding of, time invested in training someone that it should be free. We might have to think about that aspect as well. If we're sitting at an instrument, it's got beam time. If we're doing something, there's some latitude, but specifically if it's instrument oriented, I think my institution would want somebody to pay a bill.
I think that's in the same category as travel expenses, and it's certainly something that we're going to consider in the process of designing any kind of exchange of experience program that requires monetary costs.
Yeah, let's take a look at the areas of interest here. And it seems like instruments and also image analysis are definitely the winners there too. But actually, interestingly, there's also a pretty high scoring for microscopy course development too, which is interesting. And also core facility management as well. Are there specific, are there things that we didn't mention here that you thought should have been on the list? Or does anyone want to expand more on something they would like to see, and talking more granularly about one of these particular areas?
Did we actually get to see the area at the bottom of the slide? I maybe missed that. I was busy typing. So did everybody get to see that bottom part of the poll?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Right.
All right. Well, unless there's further discussion here, we will move forward. And Kirsten and Chloe now will talk about workshops and other types of training.
We have one more poll. So
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
This was one-on-one. I forgot.
Yes, this is the sort of one-on-one, either in person or a virtual experience.
Yes,
and then we now have the poll related to more of a group experience, if that would be of value to people. So similar sorts of questions on the whole, but again, just trying to get a sense of whether the community thinks there's value in that. So we'll leave that up and let you have an opportunity to respond, and then we'll come back with some discussion. And maybe we can have a sort of general discussion about the exchange of experience and whether there's a preference for one or the other, or whether, you know, really the preference would be in person, but right now it's a little challenging.
Okay, looks like we have our responses for the third poll here. Oh, we're still getting a few.
Is there anybody that still needs a little more time to finish up the poll, or are we good? You can raise your hand if you still need a bit more time.
Okay, let's take a look at the responses now. Thanks everyone for contributing. Looks like monthly certainly is the winner, and I guess that's not really a surprise based on how busy I know all of us are, too, that monthly is about as much as we can handle. Let's take a look at what people said for the format of the discussion, too. So rotating topic with the same group. That seems to really went out. I guess it's maybe that's also a way to sort of develop community too, if it's always with the same group of people, but being able to rotate through a topic as well. Let's see here.
I'm wondering if people, can we just go back to that question for a sec? I'm wondering if people, if we're the people who voted for rotating topic with the same group, if it would be helpful in that group to have it be sort of a cohort of like maybe people who are just starting out, or if you would envision this more as like a mix of more junior and senior people. If there's any opinions on that, you can just pop them in the chat or raise your hand.
Yeah, looks like most of the comments in the chat at least look to be a mix too, to get a mix of opinions, maybe also some mentoring in there as well, I assume.
And I think we certainly could do both the rotating topic with the same group and at the same time focus groups on specific topics.
Yeah, as Wendy mentions, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, can you see
Right.
now?
Format, and we were just on to the last question, the areas of focus. Still looking actually like it's basically the same distribution as for the in-person ones. Though I'm assuming though when people, at least it's my assumption when I think about it, that you're getting sort of maybe a different kind of information from the one-on-one experience versus the virtual group experience. I don't know if anybody had any comments on that about you'd be, even if it's the same topic, you'd be getting kind of different kinds of information or different kinds of experience, different interaction. Since we're finishing up here, does anybody have any sort of general comments about exchanges of experience and something we're not thinking about, ideas, things about grant mentorship and funding opportunities? Okay, so that'd be good. Statistical analysis and sampling. So that's all another good suggestion too. Yeah, those are good topics.
I guess I would ask, before we move on, if given the current circumstances, there is a general preference for us to focus on these virtual experiences. Everybody had indicated that they were very enthusiastic about the exchange of experience, even despite COVID. But given the current situation, would it be sensible to think that everybody would be perhaps more comfortable for the next 3 or 4 months to focus on the virtual pieces, both the one-on-one virtual and the potentially the group virtual, and then to consider spinning out the in-person activities perhaps more towards next summer when travel will be a little bit easier. I know travel within the United States internally is fairly reasonable, but certainly you can't get across the Canadian border, and I suspect there are challenges across the Mexican border.
I think the border situation hopefully is changing, but these are also not mutually exclusive. And I think that it will take us maybe until next summer to organize everything about what would go into having a one-on-one person, interpersonal exchange.
I think Elke has something to say.
Elke, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I think we shouldn't just tie the virtual experience to the COVID situation, because as we saw in the answers before, there are other things that keep people from going to other places. And we've learned from this pandemic situation that there's a lot of benefits to being able to just pop in and not have to spend the dollars and not have to cross a border to reach out to people or to find a group of people to exchange with. And I think that should be part of the mix, no matter the pandemic situation.
And it sounds like from what Doug was saying that we might need to also get a little bit creative about, even if you're not traveling for one of these experiences, there are still expenses associated with it. You know, if you're training, you're not necessarily on your systems, either training other people or having user fees covering the time that you're not there. So I think that that's also something that we can certainly consider. Great, this has been helpful feedback. Are there any other comments? Is there anything coming up in the chat that we should take? Great. Thank you for all the comments in the chat, folks. That's great. Should we move on then to the next section, and I will pull up the slides for training activities and workshops.
All right, so Torsten and Chloe will be presenting this part of the meeting.
Hello everyone, my name is Torsten and I would like to go over this this slide pretty quickly. So Chloe and I are part of this training and activity work groups or workshops, and we've sticked our heads together in order to come up with some ideas and areas that we should or could focus on during the next years, hopefully. Unfortunately, things are pretty limited due to the pandemic, but we'll have hopefully a lively discussion about how we can overcome things and what could be added to focus areas. And yeah, so before I go into this, there's like a little screenshot on the right side about the upcoming poll, and we debated about this quite some time, how we should organize this. So there's only there's 3 areas, so which is like a for beginners, and we have an intermediate and advanced poll, and then basically not interested in. So it should be pretty easy and pretty straightforward. So the areas of focus, and that's again what we thought might be of interest to a broad audience, is obviously would be of interest to most of us or many of us, core facility management, which would include soft skills, financial aspects, timing, but also development of courses eventually. So there might be some cross talk between different activities. Then areas might be also general microscopy training, user training in general, so at basic levels or for both basic users, new users, but also talking about specific instruments and new technologies. So this should be really open for discussions as well. Then other areas could be advanced imaging methodologies, starting from image processing, image analyses, all these things that are coming into play. But then also analysis software, and there's quite a few out. Obviously, we have freeware, or software that is freely available, but also commercial available software. And then one important aspect, obviously, is data management. Talking about new technologies, light sheet and whatever we think about. There is a lot of data, or the amount of data that we generate is so huge, and we have to find ways in order to store data and also make sure that the data are safe. Then quality control is another important issue. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, this could be discussed with other subgroups as well. And then obviously we thought about going into the high schools and attracting K-12 teenagers and starting to talk about microscopy and what resources or what materials we could present to them, and how we could attract these young guys into the field of science or using microscopes in the future. So as I said, the format might be a little bit difficult since we are still in the midst of the pandemic, and I don't know how travel will be possible during the next year. But obviously the most common format would be the workshop, hopefully in person as soon as possible, but mostly hybrid or still virtual. We could have webinars, seminar series, but again, they're probably different formats, and we would really like to have a lively discussion about this, the formats itself, since we don't want to be copycats, and there's a lot of organizations out there that obviously provide workshops and seminars. So those are things that hopefully you guys have good ideas that could put in the chat, and then we'll go on from there. I think that's all I have for now.
So I will put the poll in the chat, and if you guys could answer that, and then that will hopefully stimulate some discussion afterwards as well. That'd be great. Thank you.
That are coming. It's good.
So it looks like we have 23 responses at the moment, which is great. Thank you. Keep those coming in, 24.
So we reach the plateau, I think, at 25.
Just got up to 26, so I think there might be 27. I think there are still a few people in there. We'll give it another little while. It's rather like when you put the popcorn in the microwave and it pops, and then it goes very quiet, and then you hear the occasional pop, and another pop. If you don't catch it before then, it goes up in flames. Hopefully this won't.
So I think the first and the second questions consolidate what we have seen from the other polls, that advanced imaging and image analysis is in high demand from an advanced perspective. So basically, quite a lot of people know the basics, but they want more advanced knowledge. So that's good. We know the target. That's very and we after in the beginner level we lack apparently knowledge in data management and quality control. So something that we might not be aware, when we start our job. So that's good. We are highly skilled in image analysis and techniques, but we need even more advanced knowledge on this. But we need the basics in something that is not related, I guess, to microscopy. So that's good. That makes sense. We have maybe a little bit, I don't know, maybe some people didn't answer for the schools. So definitely some needs there for beginner and advanced level, and same for diversity. So a mix of the different levels, not only basics but also advanced. Okay. And for core facility management, it's more highly in the advanced. Okay. Again, more we see from the second question that it's more advanced methodologies and analysis software that is in basically top 3, I would say. The other one that in third place, we have the general microscopy training, which is, very interesting.
I think it's quality control actually at 14.8. It's a slightly different color blue, and so that is very hard.
Oh, that's a quality control. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I missed the general microscopy. Pardon. Yeah, that was quality control. Okay, quality control. That was more, I guess, basic knowledge, from what I understand. Okay. No, quality control. Sorry, that will be advanced. Okay, from the first. Okay, so top 3. Advanced methodologies, analysis software, and quality control. Okay. Other ideas, that was deep learning, training the trainers. Okay, so shadowing, and the Center for Open BioImage Analysis is looking to put together a course on image analysis for core staff and managers. We are hoping for more direction, more structure and topic are most wanted. Okay, that's definitely the data that we are getting there can be useful. Sampling and statistical analysis, machine learning. So a lot of machine learning, which I think is definitely going with a advanced level of analysis software and advanced methodology. So all good to know and to put on our top priorities.
Sorry, Chloe, there's one thing that came up in the chat. Obviously, imaging ethics might be a bit of interest. So, how far can we go and manipulate images? I think that's really important. So there
Yeah.
could be a workshop or, at least a seminar, something about this.
And equipment maintenance from Aurélie. Yeah, okay. And
Yeah,
so
I think actually that would be a good topic as well. Besides the ethics, it would also be, I think the maintenance is a really good topic we hadn't thought of, because there's a lot you can do on your own that wouldn't violate warranties, or that you can do if you don't have a warranty before you have to call in and make a service call. And I think that people would probably like to see some of that.
So Elka has her hand up, so maybe we could just hear the question there and then we can get back.
Sorry to be annoying here, but it wasn't quite clear in the poll whether you were talking about workshops to actually train the people, the attendees in that particular aspect, or to train the trainers. So I think when you're talking about general microscopy, then it's a training of trainers. So how do we get that to our trainees? Whereas when we're talking about core facility management, then the attendees are actually learning about that. So these are kind of two different aspects, and it wasn't quite clear when I was looking at it. I'm like, okay, probably nobody in this group wants beginner level microscopy training themselves. So yeah, you might want to make sure that you distinguish that.
good point.
And actually, before we move on to the next topic, since we are talking about QC, I would just like to put in a plug for the QC and Data Management Working Group, who are working with Quareb Limi to actually put together some protocols to help facilities with the quality control. And BINA will be developing a metrology suitcase program, a little bit akin to the one that the France BioImaging has, where we'll send out to you the pieces of equipment that you need in order to do some of that. You get to use it for a month to do the QC that you want, and then you would ship it back or ship it on to the next person, I think is the way it's going to go. So please keep your eyes peeled for potentially another community conversation around that if you are interested in QC.
Okay. And so for the mostly that will be for the format that will be workshops, right? The last question was about the format. And so I guess like Elke was mentioning, the virtual has a lot of advantages. And we see this in the poll. And definitely, so workshop, in-person or hybrid is a top. It's where the people can see that they will get the most of the knowledge. So that's good. Online self-paced, definitely not in our top priorities apparently. So that's good. And maybe some roundtable also got a good percentage. Okay, so that was very useful. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts on this. If you want to put more comments on this topic, please, you are welcome to put it in the chat. Thank you.
Kate, you are muted still.
Yes, okay. Jason and Christina now will talk to us about ideas that the working group has had for training resources to make available online.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Non-interactive.
Non-interactive, yes. Well, but I mean, I think all of the training resources that we've seen so far through COVID obviously have to have somewhere to go, somewhere where we can all easily find them, and add to them as we go on. I think a lot of different groups are doing so many different projects, and I think one of the ways that BINA can help with this is to find a way to universally put together databases that are easily searchable, that cover a lot of this content. I think finding this content has been a huge part of the problem going forward here. And I know Christina and myself both independently have worked on training tools and online tools to be able to get our users moving forward during COVID, and a lot of people have been doing the same. But finding all this and aggregating this together is obviously a big effort that multiple groups, not only BINA, but the global bioimaging groups and the international groups are doing as well. But finding a way to really kind of consolidate a lot of this information and work together to put it all out there for people to find universally is ultimately what we're after, I think. But you know, we want to get ideas on how to best approach this. You know, what is the best, what do you guys think is the most sort of universal way of getting this information? Is it, you know, through, you know, visual media like YouTube videos, or text, you know, documents like PDF files that talk about training manuals that aren't, you know, that aren't so specific to manufacturers, but are more universal? And then where ultimately do we put this stuff? Do we put it on a forum? Do we put it on web pages? Do we put it out there in other formats that we may not have necessarily delved into? So I know hopefully many of you have already taken a peek online at BINA's training resources database, the information that's already there. It isn't, you know, completely comprehensive, but I think it's a really good start to being able to aggregate this information. So we'd like to find out a little bit more from you guys about what kind of stuff you'd like to see going forward. You know, does BINA get involved in developing these tools themselves? Does, you know, and what kind of gaps do we currently have? You know, obviously the language barrier, not just globally, but in North America is pretty tremendous. You know, how do we best disseminate that information? And then ultimately, how would you guys like to consume this? You know, would you like to you know, do it through the web? A lot of people, the last poll was interesting, with, you know, few people wanting to get their training resources online specifically. But yeah, how best do we consume this material? So I think if Christina, if she doesn't have anything to add.
No, I think that pretty much covered it, Jason. Thank you. I know from struggling to put together my own online resources, as you mentioned, Jason, that you had also done, having a global access point for a lot of this information is going to be absolutely critical, but it's an immense challenge to figure out how to put that together in a useful way. So hopefully that poll will provide some insight for us.
Yeah.
Okay, I did just drop into the chat the link to the poll for this slide deck. So if you would take a few minutes to go ahead and complete that, that'd be great. Okay, looks like we have 8 responses so far. So thank you, everybody. It's great. 11. Wow.
Yeah, we asked people to type some answers, so that may be a little bit longer.
I think we're doing pretty well on timing. I think we're pretty much where we need to be at this point. So it's good. Take what time you need.
In the chat, Elka mentioned the challenge of producing video in multiple languages. And this is something that we've had a lot of discussions about how to handle. So I'm curious to see what the community thinks about different approaches to that. But it is a significant challenge to produce technical material in multiple languages. And it's certainly not a burden that I think should fall obviously to any one core or any one core director. So I'm really hoping that this is a place that BINA can step in and help support the community.
It just means that I cannot actually officially publish my videos on the institution website because of language laws here in Quebec that mean that my published material would have to be in French.
So I think the feedback that we've heard thus far has been that entry-level material in multiple languages would be very helpful, because as people get more advanced in their careers, they tend to be interacting more in English. And so it's in order to sort of grasp that those earlier career scientists having multiple languages, at least the basic training in some multiple languages would be very helpful. Certainly from the Africa community that we've interacted with, French language materials for them would be tremendously useful, is what they'd said.
And I think our original idea is, and I believe that Thierry is working with Chloe and Chris, perhaps some other people, to see what's already available in French or Spanish and aggregate the links to those materials first, rather than taking on the tremendous project of translating things.
But
maybe eventually, but not right away.
But it's a real challenge, because since this language for science is English, everything is in English because everybody could understand, right? So as soon as we post something, we put it in English. So it's used by a high range of the community, right? So that's a problem in France, for example, where you would think that they put a lot of material in French. It's very difficult to find some material in French, actually. So it might be the work of different people who are doing like a little bit of French videos, and we could maybe try to gather, but promote and say, if you do it, then we will post it, and so it can be available to the Quebecers and all the French speaking, the Francophones community.
If I may add on that topic, sorry, can you hear me? Yes. So you're completely right. In France, the National Research Institute, they ask us to do the trainings in English because there are foreigners also in France. So, and as in anywhere in the world, it has to be in English. However, there's quite some materials as well, especially for technicians that are in French. And I think that's really, we can definitely start with that to at least try to gather everything that's already available, to make it available to the whole community. Asking everyone to do it both in English and in other languages is definitely a burden that we cannot, cannot spend that much time on that. But yeah, there are already a few things that are available.
If I may chime in, I think I agree with everybody that at this point, the global scientific language is still English. However, we also have problem reaching communities that are not majority Anglophonic. And I think the reason is because when people are searching or when people are looking for announcement, they are looking at their own language. They can absolutely handle the material in English, but they are not, it's not on their radar. So I think to sort of find a halfway point and probably a time saving and efficient entry point for that is we keep all the material, at least for now, in English, but we can annotate them in French, maybe in Spanish, and make any kind of announcement in multi-languages. And I think that will help out quite a bit.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, Vanessa, if you can scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, that's perfect. Microscopy U, all right. So the one that's been around the longest, right? Oh, that's good. So I'm glad to see so many people are actually using BINA's resource so far. That's excellent. Yeah, look at that. Okay, great. And then yep, the next one. And then obviously intermediate, so much beginner. That's interesting distribution. that this almost kind of universal. I would have thought they would have migrated towards a more advanced first in this group. So that's good. Okay, so what format? Visual, yeah, videos for the most part. Yeah, things that you can consume quickly and easily. Right. Yeah. Okay, great. Routine maintenance of instruments. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. That's one that's close to my heart, actually. Just being able to have all that information consolidated somewhere that's instrument specific. Keeping up with new techniques. All great suggestions. Systematic sampling, deep learning for novices. Again, deep learning keeps coming up on the image analysis side. That's awesome. Okay, and then language. Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious actually, pause here for a second. I'm curious what people think about the current online platform. So a lot of people use YouTube, obviously, for distributing videos and for making it easy to publish. What do people think about the translation capabilities there? I know a lot of our users use the subtitles, and we didn't actually generate those. YouTube generated this stuff for us automatically. I'm wondering how people, handle that, how people think about how valuable that is, essentially, like how good of a job they do from a distribution standpoint. And is that something that we can do better with if we supply subtitles from a native speaker, for example, that's translated that more effectively maybe than an automated algorithm? Yes, Chris.
So I looked into this a while ago about the YouTube subtitles struggle with accents, and they struggle with some of the technical words. But one of the tips I found out is there's a lot of videos on YouTube these days that have these sort of automatic narrations, these almost sort of, well, they used to be very robotized sort of voices, but they're actually getting better and better. And apparently the YouTube automatic subtitling algorithms work much better with these automated narrations. So that's something, I think usually when we're producing videos, we just think of narrating them ourselves, but that sometimes you don't speak clearly, sometimes they can, you can even use jargon word. But so maybe actually looking at some kind of generalized guidelines for how to firstly put a primary language onto the soundtrack, and then that would help the accuracy of the subtitle. That's at least a tip I read somewhere from one of these sort of how to be an influencer sites that my children seem to populate quite a lot. So.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if, I'd have to look into that and see what software programs allow you to basically, narrate, essentially.
Yeah, I think you just put the script in and then you get the sound. I haven't looked into it any further than that, but I know they seem to have been getting better. These robotized voices do seem to be improving and sound more and more natural as time goes on. But whether that's commercial or there's some kind of open source solution for that, I don't know.
Mm. Okay, and then the last question about value in providing beginner level training resources in Spanish or French. Obviously, yes. Obviously, those are extremely important languages to have translated in addition to English. So, and I'm looking in the chat too to see, like, holy cow, there's. I'll have to scroll up.
It's a very active chat. It's great.
Yeah, I know, that's awesome.
Lots to think about.
Trying to see if there's anything in there. Christina, do you see anything in there that we can?
No, I think there's a conversation happening about subtitles versus translation, right?
Oh.
And so, I find when I don't know how other people are making their training resources, but when I'm making mine, at least in my core facility, I'm scripting the whole thing. And that may not be something that everybody's doing. And so, your mileage might vary with that, but ultimately, if you do have that written transcript already done, one would anticipate that some of the hurdle that we're talking about here is already taken care of, right? Because you've got that text record of what is said, hopefully close to what's said in the video. It's not always perfect. But the question then does become, how do you find a native speaker or someone who is particularly fluent to be able to translate it in a way that makes sense? So the part where I'm struggling with this is kind of, where's the hurdle? Like where's the challenging part of this? Is it someone taking the time to actually translate the text? Is it us getting the text for these training resources, codified into a document? Like, where are the issues? And it sounds like, this automatic subtitling is one place where we're kind of shortcutting the need to have a full transcript because we can generate that. And then the question just is, what's the next hurdle? Is it finding someone to do translation? If machine translation isn't good, how do we get there? And also, this is, as everyone's saying, and a lot of work. And I think there's value in that work, but becomes a question of priorities as well for everybody in the community too.
So I noticed that Wendy had put in the chat, thinking about possibly engaging students in the translation piece of it, trying to bring some of the younger community in that could learn as well as share. Chloe, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was actually, I wanted, but Noreda said in the chat too, that if when we will create the material for, so again, for the K-12, it was more to provide the teachers with material for, so for outreach in science or open science. It was not to go, we could go directly to the schools, but it was also to provide already material that would be easier with still like the pandemic going on. And this will definitely need to be in their native language. You cannot think that they will know, like a Spanish or someone in Mexico, a kid in Mexico will have a fluent English, like technical language. So we will definitely have to work on their native language. For at least for the beginner. And I think that's also from the last question, right? Like there is quite a 60% that are saying yes, for the beginner level, we need to go with a native language. So like French, Spanish, and English, and maybe other ones after. So that's we in Canada, what we do, because everything needs to be in both languages, there are people who translate. It's their job. So it could be not on our shoulders, but we could maybe have someone that will specifically translate. We could hire someone who will translate or will help us to translate the material that we think needs to be translated. Maybe not everything, but maybe the beginner level material.
Vlad, do you have your hand up also?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. So we were talking about the needs, whether we need them, whether people can just read English subtitles or not. I think it's also a matter of training the new cohort of scientists. It's an entry barrier to the space. Do we always want to rely on English, or do we want to keep that barrier for entry for other scientists in other parts of the world? I mean, if we, and also the quality of the translation, if we give it to people, to the language programs, they may not know the terms there. They may not do a really good job, and that will pretty much close it for any kind of training resource. So it has to be probably coming from community, from people who know the language, who know the terms, and who will be able to provide localization, specifically localization of the training resources in a particular language.
So I see Christina put in the chat, she's looking for volunteers who are French and Spanish speakers. So I think that is, that's a very valid point. I think if we make it clear that this is what we would like to try to contribute, and there are members of our community who would have an interest in doing that, then, this is something, come join this working group, because this is something that it does appear there is a need, certainly at the beginner level, to start identifying what would be key materials that would be worth translating. And yes, I think the low-hanging fruit is we try to find the existing materials and then fill the gaps. But if the existing materials are very sparse, then there'll be a lot of gaps to fill, and we could do with some help with that.
Okay. Anybody have any other comments, suggestions?
So is this the right time to open up the meeting to just open discussion of any topics that haven't come up, or further comments on any of the topics we've discussed today?
Yep, and it looks like Nareda has her hand up too to speak.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I apologize, but I had to move to another room and my laptop doesn't have a camera. So talking about the multiple language, especially Spanish. So my experience with the multiple language and switching back and forth is more often than I thought. I'm in Kansas, and although everything is in English, most of the time I get users with the Spanish speaking, and sometimes I do all my training in English, but they have questions, and my best way to explain is switch my my language and try to explain them few terms in Spanish and go back to English. So and this is kind of for me one of example of inclusion, and because you cannot force, and they are, I mean, I know that science is in English, but we should be open to try to share and make them to be included. And the other thing, and thinking about other program, like we should not underestimate other programs that are not in science, because sometimes making them to collaborate with science, it is a way, it's another way to be inclusive, and they can kind of be more interested in collaborate with us more than you think. Sometimes we have group from arts that they don't have any idea of how a microscope work, but when they see images, they get those ideas to create their own art and competition. So I think that the language program might be more interested than we think. I don't know.
Oh, that's
all
a
right.
good point.
That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all great feedback. So are there some general topics that came out that we wanted to revisit at all? I think we have definitely got a better understanding of where to focus the efforts. Don't you think, Kate, given the
Absolutely, yes. It's been very helpful.
We are very open to you reaching out to us and giving feedback on a more continuous basis. We do have the contact at BioImaging na.org, which you can always reach out to us at.
And you're welcome to email me directly as well. I believe my email contact information is on the BINA website under the working group list.
I
And if there
threw
any
something
other
in the chat, and I guess Chloe, about the fact that maybe some of the virtual groups, if people are interested, because I don't want to balkanize anybody, but if somebody wanted to be in a virtual group that were French speakers or Spanish speakers, that sounds like something that might be of value to people where that's their native language, rather than trying to figure out what those of us that are stuck with one language are talking about.
That's
And
a great suggestion.
aspire to more than one, but don't have it yet.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Any final comments or?
I just wanted to make one last point on the language question. I was saying in the chat that I do my trainings in English on the instruments because the software is in English, but that might be something that we should actually also push for with the manufacturers, because I mean, I work mostly with Leica microscopes, and the software conveniently for me is available in English and German. But that also means that there are frequently computer issues if your computer is actually not set up to have English as the computer language. That's also with some of the analysis programs when there's a problem with a point instead of a comma as a decimal divider, things like that. So these are barriers that that also should be addressed maybe in that direction, but it's probably not the job of the training group.
So that's great to bring up, Elke. I think that probably is the job of our corporate partners group. But we have in fact been in contact with some vendors about maybe it would be nice if they could help out. We with our, for example, with the quality control efforts, we would like to make sure that the protocols we send out for that are potentially available in Spanish, English, and French. And the companies that are involved with some of those products might be able to help us there too, because some of those are based in Europe and have access to people who speak those multiple languages. And I think the answer is they don't realize there is the demand for it. When they realize there's a demand for it that could potentially open up a market for them, then they might be more inclined to want to provide it in multiple languages. So it's a great point to raise. And I think it's something that we can take back to that group to bring up with corporate partners. So I did just drop in the chat a sort of one last poll. Thank you all for indulging us with all these many polls. We realize it's not easy, but we're looking for your feedback about the format of the meeting. And like I say, please, we would value your input on how this has gone. And if you have suggestions as to how we can improve this, because we would like to start to make this more of a regular thing where we have community conversations with different working groups hosting, highlighting the activities that they're up to and getting feedback from the community about, where BINA can help them out in these different areas. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to just complete that before leaving, that would be great. And we'll probably follow up afterwards with a link to it too, if you have to dash off right now. But again, this has been tremendously helpful. Thank you.
Could you put the last slide up again, please? Somebody? Nikki, or
I think Vanessa's on it.
Yep, thank you, Vanessa. I just didn't get a chance to say thank you to Nikki and Vanessa for facilitating this entire Zoom conference, and thanks to our nonprofit and corporate sponsors, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative in particular, and our platinum sponsors listed over here on the right. Please take the opportunity to encourage your friends and contacts to join BINA, and if you'd like to be involved in the working group in some way, shoot me an email or email BINA directly. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for helping to keep us all on time. I think we're finishing a little ahead of schedule, but better than running over time. So have an extra 10 or 15 minutes to yourselves, which is great. Thank you all. And we'll hope to see you at the next community event, which, as I say, Corporate Partners is hosting one in November. So if you're interested in joining that Corporate Partners group in November, the details on that are on our website. And I think there may well be another one around QC and data management the following month. And as I say, we're hoping to make these a regular thing. So thank you for joining us, and your feedback on how this went will help us improve the next one. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.